Stay tuned for today's Antidote, brought to you by the Renegade Success Network. Today's Antidote features a healthy dose of thought-provoking insights and information for business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and nonprofit professionals. Each day since March of 2020, this program has offered that one thing to help you continue on your own unique pathway to success. And now, Renegades, we bring you Bob Graham and Tom Brush.
Wednesday, Tom, hump day. And one of my favorite days of the week in the top 7, I got to say, because at 1 p.m. today, it's our check-in and check-up, which I really like. It's one of my favorite things. It's a great water cooler discussion, a chance to talk to other people, to learn, to discover, and just really to get away from work for a little while. And I think it's just so valuable. So folks, if you haven't done it yet, in our Facebook group, you'll see the information. Join us at 1 p.m. Eastern time today for our check-in and check-up. How was that for an impromptu promo right at the beginning?
It was, well, I guess if it's one of your top 7 days of the week, why not share that? Are we going to hear about your other top 7 days of the week every day?
I like Fridays and Saturdays, not so big on Sundays and not so big on Mondays. I have one client where Mondays are I almost said something I can't. They are a challenge every single Monday for this client. In fact, I told them they're usually closed on Friday. I suggested that they close on Monday and work Tuesday or Friday just to change the whole karma.
Not a bad idea. At least try something different.
Yeah.
Look at it a little bit differently. All right, everyone. Good morning. I'm Tom. That's Bob. And this is today's Antidote, our daily broadcast, where we have a topic we try to discuss that we hope will help you.
We don't try to discuss it, Tom. We discuss it.
I'm not sure we always are discussing the topic. So I think we try to discuss the topic in our discussion.
I walked into that, didn't I?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
That was good.
Anyhow, so our goal is to provide at the end of the conversation one thing that'll help you move forward, whether that's today or in the future. And we would love, if you want to be part of the conversation, to share your thoughts in the comments and provide your one thing, because we know that it might help someone as they try to figure out the next steps along their own unique pathway to success. And this week we've been talking about growth, talked a little bit about what it was, considering when to grow. Today we're going to talk a little bit about managing growth and the value of that. But before we do that, we'll talk a little bit about our events that we have coming up. Bob has already shared about our check-in and check-up. But do you want to tell them about our networking events, Bob?
I would love to, Tom. So it's almost May, so it's a new month of networking events. The Renegade Roundups are Tuesday the 11th at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time if you're a morning person. And either way, you can come to both or come to one. If you're more of an afternoon person, Thursday, May 27th at 4 p.m., we'll be doing another Renegade Roundup. These are your chance to get to know your fellow Ring of Renegade members. We ask questions. Last time we did one, the question I asked people was, what was your favorite flavor of jelly bean? Which started a whole big discussion because it turned out of the people, one of the people like me doesn't like them, and the other people had really clear favorites. And it started a great discussion. And one of the people even suggested that he likes orange because he believes that they're healthy, because they have vitamin C, even though he knows it's just sugar.
Sure.
But it was just a great insight. And from that, it led to discussions about business. And that's how we do our networking events. It's not about, you get 30 seconds to give your pitch. It's more about getting to actually discuss with people real issues, real things going on, so that they can try to figure out what kind of character you have and whether you're someone that they want to refer business to, partner with, or just have on their advisory council for when that question comes up.
Awesome. So again, we hope you'll join us for our networking events on Tuesday, May 11th and Thursday, May 27th. And again, there'll be more information about that inside the Ring of Renegades Facebook group.
That May 27th makes me feel like the month is just flying by.
It hasn't started.
But it's still, we're talking about it already.
Memorial Day weekend.
It's the following weekend, right? It's late this year.
Correct, because that's a Thursday. You're right.
Right. So 31st, I think.
Memorial Day
Yep.
weekend.
That's right.
All right, so let's get to our topic today, which is managing growth and the value of that. It's interesting, when we were talking about topics, we thought about discussing slowing it. And I think based on our conversations at the beginning of the week that, there's always growth. Just about how not slowing it. You always want to keep growing. Just might be in where you decide to grow within your business or your organization or yourself. And so there is this opportunity to manage where you grow and how you grow. So why don't you share a bit of thoughts about that, Bob?
My thoughts are really simple. You have to control or manage your growth. If you just allow the marketplace to dictate, so if you're a company with 4 employees and suddenly you get slammed with orders and you can't keep up, but everyone wants you and there's no way you can fulfill all of it, you're going to slow your growth because someone's going to be upset. And I see this with companies all the time. They get really busy or they lose a key employee and it slows them down. Conversely, I've seen companies where they go really slow. It's like, I don't really want to add this product or service because it's going to be more business and this and that. There's a middle ground, but the key to me is you've got to be thinking about it. You can't let the marketplace dictate your growth. Tom, you and I have been building this network for the last year, and we had something we were working on yesterday. And we both were anxious to get it done by noon yesterday. We were pushing hard. But at 11:25, 11:35, we're like, you know what? We need to step back and take a breath for a day. It's not worth rushing it to not do it the best we can. And to me, that's how we manage growth, is to have those discussions. And it's hard to do alone. I'm glad that the two of us, we see things differently. It was a rare case where you were pushing and I was slowing us down. But that friction is really valuable in an organization. It really does get to the better solution, because if you had said, you know what, Bob, this is a deal breaker. It needs to be done by noon. I don't care if it's good, bad, or indifferent. Let's get it done. I would have done it. But we talked about what was our goal, what were we trying to accomplish, what's our overall mission, and how does this one little thing, which yesterday at 11 o'clock seemed like the most important thing in my world. But by 12 o'clock, I had moved on to other bigger issues. And last night, I was thinking about it. And this morning, I was like, oh, I got to get back to that. And I think that's managing growth, is having that ebb and flow and recognizing that a great idea doesn't mean instant implementation.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's the challenge, is that how do we not either over slow down or over try to speed up? People are like, well, I've got, I want to have 8 different locations of what I'm doing, when I'm not really sure I've perfected the one that I have, and really try to understand exactly what it is. And will I be able to replicate that to the best I can in another location, which is going to be unique? Traffic patterns are going to be different. Buying patterns are going to be different. People are different. The people I hire might be different. And so I think that the challenge is, how do you find ways to ensure that when it is time for growth like that, you are prepared?
Or standardizing, right?
Correct.
Having a process that says each new employee goes through these 5 processes to get so they know exactly what to do and they're going to handle this. And that's where I think a lot of smaller companies struggle, is they're lacking the process. It just evolved, just like our business has evolved over the year. If we had a third person come in, we'd have to build the processes from the ground up. It's like, well, how do you guys put together that Facebook Live every morning? Well, at about 5 of 8, Tom and I talk about a topic some days, and we come on 10 minutes late because we're still scrambling with the graphic. And the person would say, you guys are crazy. Why aren't you doing these 3 weeks in advance? And we'd say, well, we'd like to, but this gets in the way, this gets in the way. And so I think that's part of that. Managing growth is literally managing what it requires to grow. And also slowing growth, look at some of the vaccine companies, right? We had the vaccine company in Baltimore that had 15 million doses that weren't able to be used because they had a production problem. That's a huge hit. Managing growth would be, whoa, hey, time out, guys. We got a problem here. We need to step back. The FDA required it, of course, but companies do this all the time. They step back. We have car dealers or car manufacturers right now that can't get the computer chips. So they're not making as many cars. They don't want to slow down. There's actually a pent-up need for new cars, but they can't get the parts. So they're being forced to delay things. And I think we have that in our businesses. There are certainly times in my business where I didn't have money to do the things I wanted to do.
Right.
Or I was flush with cash. One December, I had a lot of money. It's like, okay, we need to buy a new computer to manage that growth.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think it's interesting. You look at the companies that have done it well, and they are very process oriented, probably almost to the point that the people who buy those franchises are frustrated by the processes they are required to do. And, I think truly understanding what they wanted to do, I think, and I don't know that I know this for sure, but, watching the whole movie about McDonald's and how Ray Kroc bought it, and they had a process that they used in the one store that the two brothers who started it owned. And the guy loved the process, but it was interesting that what he really loved was buying real estate. And so they just were like, okay, let's just take this process, and we feel it's going to work anywhere. It didn't really, for a long time, like there weren't a whole lot of new items on the menu. There wasn't their growth was, we want locations. And so the process has to stay the same. Doesn't matter whether, we think people are going to like the way we make hamburgers in the South or the North or the West. This is what we are going to do. And our goal is growth. And then we'll figure out how do we add menu items, change some of the other things that we do, because this piece of our organization is exactly the way we want it. Now we can go forward and replicate it. And I think sometimes that's the challenge, as you mentioned, is that we are all over the place with our processes. And then when we consider the growth, it's processes that we've created that work for us that might not necessarily work for someone else. It's not so automated or so controlled of a process that it will have value, that someone else can just walk in and pick it up.
I always think of it as being written on my arm, not on a sheet of paper. And I've got long sleeves, so no one knows that process but me. And I can look at it, and it's perfect. I know the code words and all that. But if you said to me, what's the process? Tom, I need to write that out for you.
And I think that's one of the challenges for small businesses is, when they bring on new people, or when they look to grow, they're going to add another salesperson, or they're going to add another technician, or whatever the case might be, is how do we instill in that person what we want so that they are able
Tim's comment here. Wait, you guys have a process.
We do have a process.
It's growing. It's evolving.
And it works for us. As you said, a third person would come in and be like, you guys are crazy. They might say that anyway.
And we also have this issue with teams. When teams add a new employee, suddenly all the things that are institutional knowledge, it's like, I remember working at one job and I'm like, so how do they know I did my work? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, do I tell someone when I'm done something? They're like, well, everyone knows you go to the manager. I'm like, it wasn't in the manual. And
right.
I've been here 4 days.
And people do things differently. I think that's it's always funny. You feel like, it's great in sports team. That's an analogy. It's like, oh yeah, they added the missing piece. Well, for some reason, the missing piece doesn't provide the growth that they thought, because you can't sometimes just plug in something new, some new growth and have it in. And so in some ways, you sometimes have to take a step back and slow that growth so that you ensure when you hire a new person, the onboarding process is strong enough that they will know exactly what to do. And they will know exactly the processes that need to be followed so that they can be incorporated in quicker. And so in that way, in reality, slowing down and making sure that's right will ultimately help you speed up your growth, because they will have a faster learning curve, likely be happier, and more willing to do and effective at what they do.
And there are some examples of growth, Tom, that I don't think we even think of as growth. I was talking to someone the other day who had a new website, and it's really great. But one of the things on that website is there's a form. And where does that form go? And who responds? And what are the processes around that form? Which you'd say, well, that's not really growth. I'd say it is, because it's not something that they were doing before, and the website might generate more traffic because it's got SEO and all these things that the old website didn't have. So thinking through those processes of just something simple like, okay, someone fills out the form. Whose email is it going to, and who's going to respond, and in what way, could be a huge driver of growth. You know, nothing's worse than when the person has reached out to you and you don't respond.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Because it's really difficult for you to figure out how to do that. And I think the only way you're able to truly manage, and maybe this is my one thing, so maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, is if you evaluate. You know, if you continue to go back and understand what's going on, why is this happening? What am I going to do to move forward?
Hey, Tom, I've got can you see up in the upper right? Do you see all the feeds? There's a weird exclamation mark around one of them.
Yes, we somehow lost our feed to the Ring of Renegades, but not anywhere else.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know what the deal is. So, you know, every time you think you're growing, sometimes things that you don't control move you back. We just have to manage it.
No, that's fine. I just saw that all of a sudden, and it kind of threw me.
Yeah, I had seen it for a few seconds, so that's
okay. Well,
going with it.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I cut you off in the middle of your one thing.
No, I was just saying that I think the best way to understand how to manage it is to just continue to evaluate it and evaluate where you are and understand, you know, again, those three questions just continue to be effective of what's going well, what didn't go as planned, and what might we do differently as we continue to figure out, you know, if we look at an onboarding process that wasn't that effective with a new employee and there were issues. Now, it could be the person, which maybe means if it's the person who doesn't get through our onboarding system, is it the onboarding system or is it the hiring process? And I think those are important things to differentiate between is, geez, if we hired who we thought was really good, but they struggled through our onboarding process, where's the missing link in that? And how can we get those more seamless so that the hiring process is exactly the way we want it, that makes it easier to get the right person who's going to come in, and the onboarding piece is going to be, and that's going to allow them to assimilate into the group that much quicker, which means that we can then move forward. So I think that to me, the key is it's really hard to manage if you don't evaluate it and understand where it is and understand the results, and then figure out what you're going to learn from it.
I like that a lot. I would add to that it's also really hard to look at stuff objectively when you're involved in it. Having an outside perspective, whether it's a friend, whether it's someone in another business or a coach, that can just say to you, hey, you know, that process might not be perfect. I have one client where I point out simple little things that almost always open a huge can of worms. And I have another client that does something, and I watch them do it with their clients. And I was like, well, why do you do this? Well, we've always done it that way. I'm like, okay, but what's the result for the customer? How do they see it? No, Bob, we've always done it this way. And I'm like, yeah, I don't respond well to that answer. That's usually the sign that we need to explore it. And it's really hard to do by ourselves. You and I struggled yesterday with the two of us.
Right.
And we help companies with this all the time. But with the two of us, there was a tug of war that was going on inside both our heads. And if we had had a third party sitting there going, guys, You're wasting all this time debating something. It's not going to make or break you to fix it today. Let it go for a day.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You said that you help with the small things. And what's funny is I think that usually you don't see big problems, or they are so apparent. If a piece of equipment breaks down, that's a big problem. If, someone decides to leave, that at least is a hole that is an opening.
Your biggest client goes to another company.
And typically you have processes in place for that.
Yep.
The little ones actually, I think, point out problems with bigger problems. If you're struggling with, like, why are we not retaining customers? What's the reason for that? They're in once, but then they don't come back, even though they maybe said they had a good experience. Or we solved the problem. But maybe the experience was. And you think, why did this one person's issues happen? And when you dissect those small problems, you usually identify that there is a kink in the bigger process that needs to be addressed. And so I think, when we just play off, well, that was one person, or that was a one-time thing, likely it's not. And it's likely a part of a bigger challenge that needs to be addressed. And so, I would also encourage you that when you see these little things, don't brush them off as, well, that's an anomaly.
Yeah.
Usually there aren't anomalies. There are things that they lead to bigger challenges that the organization has. You just haven't seen it yet.
Did I ever tell you about the company I worked with about 7 years ago? And their phone didn't ring one day, all morning, not one call. No one said anything. 1:30, the owner walks in. He had been at meetings, came in. He said, "Can I have my messages?" And they said, "There are none." And he said, "What do you mean there are no messages? What have you been doing?" They said, "The phone hasn't rung all day." He picks up the phone, no dial tone. Literally, the phone wasn't working. And no one thought that was a possibility, even though he said, after 2 hours, we get slammed with calls in the morning. Didn't someone think that something was wrong? And they're like, "We just thought it was a slow day." And those are the types of things, I think.
Sure.
We've all done something similar, every one of us. And you go, "Oh, that's what it is." I had a time when I was having people pay by PayPal their invoices, and the link I was sending turned out to be the wrong link. And I wasn't getting paid for a couple weeks. Couldn't figure out. Finally, I called someone like, "Hey, did you pay that invoice?" "No, the link's bad." "What do you mean the link's bad?" Well, sure enough, the link was bad. I had copied all but one character, and having the last character makes a big difference on a link.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And it took me 3 weeks to investigate that because, I'm busy with all the other stuff. And it's like you make excuses. And I think those little things affect growth. Getting paid today versus 3 weeks from today affects growth. It affects operations. It affects every aspect of a business. So I would just say, keep an eye on those things and look at like you were saying, look at the little things and see if they signal something bigger or something that's looming in the distance.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we hope that if you have your one thing, you will be willing to share it. That would be great. And I'm sure it will help others as we all try to grow and know that we have to manage that growth sometimes. So if you've enjoyed this conversation, we hope that you will join us, if you're not already there, inside the Ring of Renegades Facebook group. It's easy to do. Just go to Facebook, search for Ring of Renegades, and ask to join. Because it is a private group, we're going to ask you to tell us why you're a renegade. And then you can become a part of our growing community, where we are helping people identify and take their next step along their own unique journey to success. So hopefully we'll see you inside the Ring of Renegades Facebook group, or we'll see you today at 1 o'clock Eastern time for our Wednesday's check-in and check-up. And if not, we'll see you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern time for our next edition of today's Antidote. And as we wrap up today, Bob, do you want to tell people a little bit about our Find Your Renegade Way in 90 days?
I will, and I'm telling you, I'm going to put together some sort of thing, graphic video thing, because you get me every time on this. So folks, we put together the Find Your Renegade Way in 90 Days program. The goal of this program is really simple: to figure out the obstacles that are standing in your way and get you on the path to overcoming them. We all have obstacles. Maybe it's reluctance to make phone calls. Maybe it's not knowing who to call. Maybe it's not knowing what you're really trying to sell. Maybe it's not knowing how to market effectively. Maybe it's not knowing how to go to your customers and explain to them that you need to raise rates. It could be any of those things. It could be how you work with your team. You're just not getting them to understand what you're trying to achieve. The vision isn't clear. It could even be that you're trying to find a job, a different job, and you need some help with that process because you haven't done that in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. All these things are the perfect kind of thing for your Find Your Renegade Way in 90 Days program. It's interactive in that you get to talk to Tom or me. You can ping pong back and forth as many times as you need to in 15-minute increments over that 90 days. So you'll have a goal setting call at the beginning. And once you get that goals figured out, what you want to achieve in the 90 days, we will be off to the races. You'll have accountability, you'll have focus, and you'll have motivation because Tom and I are big believers in celebration. And when you achieve even the smallest step towards your goal, we are the first ones to say to you, congratulations, that is awesome. And so if that's something that you think might drive you for the next 90 days, please join us. We're getting ready to kick off our 90 days, and we'd love to have you join us. I will put the link down in the chat right now so you have it. You fell asleep on me, didn't you, Tom?
I did not.
Okay, all right, just checking.
Deciding when to end. So I'm going to end the broadcast now.